Well, hello everyone. Welcome, welcome. For those of you who are joining us live, welcome to Savoring the Sacred, a mini retreat to embrace the season of Advent. I'm Heidi Bussey. I'm the editor of Give Us This Day, and with me today is Mary DeTurris Paust. She is a frequent contributor to Give Us This Day. Mary is a writer, retreat leader, yoga and meditation teacher, spiritual director, and author of 6 books, and maybe with more on the way. We'll see. Welcome, Mary. Before we begin, I have just a few housekeeping details to share with you. This conversation is being recorded, and we will share a link with you via email as soon as it's available. You will also find a link to this recording on the Give Us This Day Facebook page within the next couple of days, so you can check there as well. Feel free to tell others about this in case they missed the opportunity to attend the retreat live. All participants are in listen-only mode, so your cameras and microphones are turned off. Please use the Q&A feature down there at the bottom of your screen, of the Zoom screen, to ask any questions or share any comments. A little bit later in the retreat, we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. So, Mary, I know those joining us today, many of whom are subscribers to Give Us This Day, have come to appreciate your inspiring reflections. And so I will go ahead and let you take it from here.
Thank you, Heidi. And thank you to everyone who's here today. It's so good to be with you during this beautiful Advent season. Yes, I write for Give Us This Day. It is one of my favorite writing assignments that I do whenever one comes up. I started my career in the Catholic press and was a Catholic journalist for a good chunk of my life until through one of my books, I ended up deciding I wanted to focus more on the spiritual side rather than the quote business of the church. And that led me deeper and deeper into spiritual writing, leading retreats, writing for Give Us This Day, writing reflection books for Liturgical Press. And my next reflection book will be next Advent. So that's the next book that's coming. So before we tackle our topic directly today, I thought it would be good if we could settle into this sacred virtual space and take a moment to do something that will serve us well as we go through the season of Advent, if we can learn to cultivate it. And those are some short bursts of pause, a pause break, to just briefly center ourselves in God and ponder the things that transport us beyond our earthly worries that usually keep us spinning. So I'm going to read a poem by Mary Oliver from her beautiful book, Devotions. And there will be a list of resources in the chat that have links to things I mentioned. And I'd ask you to either close your eyes or gaze down, whatever you're comfortable with, and relax your shoulders. Let your hands rest on your lap. Let your face soften. Notice your breath. Don't do anything to it, but just let it deepen. Sort of noticing that it's deeper than maybe. And if you're feeling yourself breathing high in your chest, see if you can bring that down to the belly. Sort of bringing us to this quiet, restful place. As I read you this poem called Mindful. Every day, I see or hear something that more or less kills me with delight, that leaves me like a needle in the haystack of light. It is what I was born for, to look, to listen, to lose myself inside this soft world, to instruct myself over and over in joy and acclamation. Nor am I talking about the exceptional, the fearful, the dreadful, the very extravagant, but of the ordinary, the common, the very drab, the daily presentations. O good scholar, I say to myself, how can you help but grow wise with such teachings as these? The untrimmable light of the world, the oceans shine, the prayers that are made of grass. So take a few more breaths here. Notice if anything jumped out at you during that poem. And maybe you're wondering, why did I choose this poem, a secular poem, instead of scripture or something more obviously tied into Advent? And I think it's because this poem really speaks to what we hope to do today, which is to recognize that savoring the sacred does not happen only in those exceptional or extravagant moments and events, but more often than not, if we're paying attention in the most ordinary and drab experiences of our lives. So we'll dive in. It's hard to believe in some ways that we're already nearing the end of the first week of Advent. By now, we may have found our sacred rhythm, or maybe we're feeling like we just can't wrap our arms around a season of prayer and waiting during a time filled with so many things we have to get done. Sure, they're joyful things, but even joyful things can feel overwhelming if we let them get the best of us. So today we're going to look at what we have to do and what we want to do and see if we can bring those things together so that the many activities of this holiday season become opportunities for prayer rather than obstacles to it. So I'll start by telling you a story of when my children were young. So if you've got young children or if you've raised young children, you know what this is like. When we were younger, we had a series of Advent events, rituals designed to help us stay anchored in the wild seas of the Christmas season with children. We had our wooden Advent calendar with the little doors that opened to every day, add one more piece to the magnetic nativity scene. We had the Advent wreath with candles to light and extinguish, which is always fun for kids. And we had an Advent chain that we would construct out of construction paper and then remove a piece one link every day so that they could see Christmas visibly getting closer. 3 things for 3 children. So that should keep everyone happy, right? Wrong. One year we resorted to a coin toss because things had gotten so out of hand. Doesn't everyone start Advent with a coin toss? Back then, our older kids, my children are all now 27, 24, 19. Back when they were young, the older 2 could do the math quickly and figure out, where do I have to be in the rotation of opening the door so that I know I'm the one who gets to put Jesus in the manger? And there would be wailing and gnashing of teeth when the others realized what was happening. So one year it got so bad, the fighting so extreme, that I just canceled Advent. I was like, that's it, we're done. I put everything in the basement, put the Advent wreath in the dining room. I was like, we clearly are not equipped to handle Advent. And a couple of days later, my youngest let on that she and my other daughter were covertly practicing Advent with the Advent calendar hidden behind dresses and sweaters in the closet in my daughter's bedroom. So this was like a really low point for us or for me as a mom trying to have my little domestic church. And even though we may not have to wrangle children into all these various things throughout this season, we often have to wrangle our own impatient and overwhelmed selves into some semblance of spiritual peace and prayer. In some ways, we're still like those kids, right? We want it and we want it now. We want to get things done. We want to go. We want to go. And so we kind of almost have to give ourselves that same talking to kind of bring it back down and remember how we can make this season a little less frantic and a little more peaceful. Oftentimes, I think prayerfully or spiritually, we think that in order to celebrate the spiritual aspect of the season, we have to forego the fun or delay the decorating. That was me for a very long time, or skip the sales or sit home in silent prayer. But what if we can do both? What if we can savor the sacred side of this season, even as we dive into the many tasks and events that are on our plates? It can be done, and in fact, it can transform the season from stressful to serene if we're willing to kind of work with it and open ourselves to this approach. It was something I discovered when I wrote my book, Everyday Divine, which focused on weaving prayer into everyday life. We can, in a very real sense, begin to pray without ceasing when we start to look at the ordinary moments of our days as opportunities for discovering the divine in our midst. This doesn't mean we don't have to do intentional prayer and take those sacred pauses. But the two worlds, secular and sacred, do not have to be on a collision course. They can coexist, and even more so, they can complement each other by allowing this melding of the two worlds to blossom into something bigger than what we originally imagined. Now, this Advent season may come with a few extra challenges. In our divided world and country, and perhaps families, we may be entering into this season wondering how we'll navigate the challenging path of holiday gatherings and dinner table discussions. We may be filled with hope, or filled with rage, or paralyzed by numbness that threatens to overtake us. But the beauty of the Advent season is that we are surrounded by our ancestors in faith who faced seemingly insurmountable odds, but by the grace of God and with trust in God's goodness, show us day by day how to move forward even when everything else tells us to hunker down. We are not so different from what theologian Henry Nouwen referred to as the waiting people of Advent. Zechariah and Elizabeth, Mary and Joseph, Simeon and Anna. These are Advent people of both waiting and action, and they serve as role models to us as we contemplate how to move deeper into the sacred while accomplishing everything we have to do. Waiting, but active. The two are not in tension, rather they go together. We often talk about the waiting aspects of the season, and we know there are those. But our prayer life exists in both stillness and busyness. And that's kind of the key to making sure that making the season less of a frenzy and more of a faith-filled journey. So think of Mary with all she had happening, rushing to Elizabeth's side. She didn't get her message and then hide at home. She went out to care for someone else. She put her own concerns aside to put someone else front and center. And Elizabeth, we know she must have been shocked and scared, but she had a baby to prepare for. Her life had to be more than full, especially as she no doubt fretted over her suddenly mute husband. Life went on. It did not stop. And yet, what do we hear in the midst of that busyness? Some of our greatest prayers of praise and thanksgiving. Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Elizabeth says, recognizing in the ordinary moment of a greeting, the extraordinary inbreaking of God. And Mary, my soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. In the midst of her inevitable fear, in the face of her courageous fiat, she thanks God, she praises God, and gives us a prayer that is beautiful and radical. The most sacred moments of their lives and our salvation story spur not isolation or private consolation or desolation, but an outpouring of love that then surges up as prayer in the moment. Now, their circumstances obviously are wildly different from ours, and we might look at them and say, well, yeah, but they're Mary and Joseph. So how do we expect to do something similar, which is often our case, right? Perhaps we can take it down a level and look at ourselves in comparison with the shepherds, right? So they're just tending their sheep. They're in the field when God breaks into their world. They didn't find God in the quiet prayer back at home, but in the messiness of their daily lives. Or the Magi, who take up a treacherous journey, not because someone gave them a map and a guarantee, but because a star signaled something divine, and they trusted the sign. A star in the same sky we look up every time we're out at night. So we think of these stories as something for people long ago, but they're really for us right now. And so that's where we can kind of start to go deeper. Think about the things that you'll be doing in the coming weeks if you haven't already started them. Hanging Christmas ornaments and writing Christmas cards. Maybe you'll bake cookies or host a Christmas party. You'll shop till you drop, either in person or online. And none of that sounds particularly spiritual. But if we infuse those tasks with a sense of wonder and gratitude, we can begin to sense the movement of the divine right where we are. I often say the divine is not a distant dream, but a daily reality. So our faith and our tradition gives us many opportunities to use rituals and feasts to help us. Oh, I wanted to share a screen, but I don't think that's going to happen. Let me just come back to you. Anyway, we're not going to see a screen. So our tradition gives us a treasury of beautiful rituals, readings, and feast days to help us mark the season, from the candles of the Advent wreath, the blessing of the Christmas tree, to putting small gifts in shoes on the Feast of St. Nicholas, which we happen to celebrate today. So we have this ready-made structure to our days that help us mark the season. And we'll talk more about those a little bit later. So we can talk about some of the other practical things. So for example, decorating the Christmas tree. This year, as you put up your tree, and if you've already done it, you can still figure out a way to make this work. Allow the ornaments to guide you in prayer. I tend to be someone who remembers who gave me almost every ornament or where it came from. And so as I decorate the tree, I think of the person who gave me that particular ornament as I hang it from the branch. And I whisper a prayer for them. Perhaps you have family ornaments from generations past, or maybe homemade ornaments from childhoods. Whatever theme comes up for you, follow that path, ornament by ornament, as though you are not just stringing the tree with lights and bulbs, but with prayers. And you can carry that same idea over into the decorations around your house, right? I have things from my grandparents and things from my mother that always bring me back to them. And instead of just thinking, oh, this is my mother's or my grandmother's, actually making it a prayer. So it's an opportunity to sort of bring that into the spiritual side of our celebration. With holiday baking and cooking, for some folks, baking cookies is a time-honored and beloved tradition. For others, it's fraught with stress. I'm a cook, not a baker, so baking is not my fun thing. I remember when I wrote my book, Cravings, which focused on food and faith, one woman I interviewed talked about how in her tradition, it was believed that food carries the taste of love or resentment that we stir into it. So rather than approaching the baking and the cooking with worry or annoyance or frustration, can we pour in love with the flour and the butter, spread gratitude as we swirl icing, mindfully center ourselves on God as we slice and dice to create a dish for the neighborhood potluck? Stir and pray, knead and pray, chop and pray. We can see that even with some of our great mystics, right? We think of Saint Teresa of Avila in ecstasy with her visions and her deep connection with God. And yet she also said, God moves among the pots and pans. This reminder that God is present in the daily moments of our lives, in the tasks, the things we just have to get done. And if dicing and chopping and baking while you pray is not your cup of tea, then put on some Advent music and just let those songs sort of carry you to that place. When we do Christmas cards, it can be similar. You know, we oftentimes it's another one of those chores that we have to do. We see the cards coming in and we're like, I got to get writing. But we can do that same thing, using that as an opportunity to pray for people. Or even another way to do this would be to take the cards you receive, put them in a basket near your kitchen table, and every night before you settle down to dinner and light your Advent wreath and say your blessing, take a card out of the basket and pray for that person or that family. So it becomes an opportunity, again, to not just open the card, stick it somewhere or hang it somewhere, but to actually weave that into the practices for the season. And if you want to take that further, you can choose family members or friends who maybe could use a little bit of extra attention or love this season, and commit to writing a personal letter. So you can't do this for everyone, obviously, but perhaps there are a handful of people, or maybe just one, who might really appreciate hearing from you in a more intentional and personal way. One year I was leading a retreat on spiritual friendship, and I mentioned how I had met somebody who had made it a practice that in Advent or Lent, she would write one letter every day to a friend or family member for the entire season. And somebody who attended my retreat decided to take up that challenge and wrote a letter to a different person every single day of Advent. And at the end, she contacted me to tell me that it had become a truly transformational experience for her. So sometimes we have to remember that those opportunities for spiritual transformation and growth and prayer are kind of right under our nose. So unfortunately, this season comes with a lot of necessities like shopping. So it's hard to make shopping super spiritual. And we have become a gift card culture. So this year, instead of just grabbing gift cards or clicking on links that are on public wish lists, can you put more intention into that? Doesn't mean you don't buy your kids or your spouse or your parents the thing they would really love, but buying something locally made, fair trade, consider giving a child, whether they're young or an adult, a dinner date, or a parent, a dinner date to a favorite restaurant. If you know someone who wants for nothing rather than another tie or a bottle of booze, can you give something to charity and let them know that? Really thinking about the people on your list and trying to come up with something that's personal. And oftentimes, time is one of the things that is in shortest supply and the things people want the most. So if we can find ways to schedule a visit, make a coffee date with a friend, take a drive and visit an older relative, to really make the season more about just meeting those requirements and trying to get into that true spirit of what this is about, which is something bigger than all of us. And of course, love is at the base of all of it. But there is an aspect of shopping that I think is like ripe for prayer moments, the waiting. So waiting is often part of the deal, whether you're waiting in line, waiting to park, waiting on hold, waiting for guests to arrive. You can use that waiting time to pray for the people in line with you, pray for the person who stole your parking spot, pray for the friends traveling to see you. Rather than stare at your phone and scroll or just get angry, pause and pray. I first started this when I was writing Everyday Divine. I was in a doctor's office and I was flipping through a magazine that was like woefully outdated and really not of any interest to me, but it was something to do. And I realized, well, wait a minute, I could use this to do what I'm writing about, which is pray in the everyday moments. So I put the magazine aside and I began to pray for the people who were in the office with me and waiting. And I knew that for me, it was a routine visit. For many of them, it may not have been. It may have been something terrible that they were facing. So really praying for these strangers and finding this common link between us and then using that to sort of make it a spiritual moment. And the waiting prayer has really been, I think, one of my favorites. And I will admit to you that I'm still really not at the part where I'm good at praying for the person who stole my parking space. I'm working on that, but it is a good practice if you can remember it and reflect when you have one of those waits that just seems like it's a waste of time, right? Our world sees waiting as a waste of time. And so how can we make that into something that is spiritually productive, if we want to use that word? And then we have music, and it's fun to blast, Mariah Carey as you drink eggnog and throw tinsel around. But consider an Advent playlist instead, or as well, something that calls you back to the heart of the season. Back when my kids were younger, I made them crazy. I wouldn't let anybody play Christmas music till a certain point. I've mellowed a bit. But I do have an Advent playlist. And if you've never heard Advent at Ephesus by the Benedictine Sisters of Mary, it's a beautiful album. And those will be in the resources that are listed in the chat. So you'll find the links to my Spotify playlist for Advent and the Benedictine Sisters of Mary. And it can be a really beautiful way to just put that on and sit maybe while you have your coffee or enter into your prayer or while you're cooking or decorating and let the music of the Advent season rather than the Christmas season sort of be that guide. So in addition to those obvious practical things that we have throughout the season, we have celebrations, feast days that dot the trail to Christmas. And they're great opportunities for us to sort of like regroup and focus on something specific that kind of helps us move along our path. So I mentioned today is the Feast of St. Nicholas. So in my family, this was always really kind of the start of the Christmas season for us. My kids loved that they would come down on the morning of December 6th and they would find some little gift in their shoe. So which is done in the spirit of St. Nicholas, who was very generous to the poor. And legend says that he left assistance in shoes or stockings hung by the fire, which sounds familiar. This is not where we drop a lot of money. This is not where we're sticking gift cards or expensive jewelry. This is like a little toy or a trinket or a cozy pair of socks or maybe some chocolate coins. Or if you want to go really old school, an orange, although I didn't usually give my kids just an orange because that might have been very disappointing. So if you missed it today, you could still maybe throw something in the shoes by the end of the day or put it on your calendar for next year, because this one to me is such a great child-friendly way to bring the saints back into this story and remind kids what this is about. And of course, we have the Feast of the Immaculate Conception coming up in just a couple of days. And while I don't have any recipes for you for the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, this is a perfect time for us to maybe say the rosary with our family or our spouse, and to really spend time reflecting on Mary's willingness to follow God at all times, even when it was confusing or uncertain. So maybe, yes, it's a holy day, we go to mass, but maybe spending some time hanging out with Mary today, or even reflecting on who Mary is for you and how that maybe has changed over your life. As a Mary, I know that my relationship with Mary has changed dramatically from when I was a kid to when I became a mom to now that I'm older. So it's kind of interesting sometimes to just sit with that and do something a little different from what we normally would do on that feast day. And then right on the heels of that, we have more opportunities with the Feast of Juan Diego on the 9th and the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe on the 12th. And in some places, like in my parish, there's opportunities for Mexican dance, Mexican food. There will actually be a celebration with a Spanish Mass. If you don't have that opportunity, we can still reflect on the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. If you want to go for it and make yourself Mexican food, there's a recipe for Mexican wedding cookies in the resources. We can find ways to make this feast part of our Advent celebration. And Our Lady of Guadalupe, you can see she's one of my favorites. She's up there on the wall behind me. My Irish grandfather was a huge fan of Our Lady of Guadalupe many years ago, and he kind of started me on that journey. Then I moved to Texas, where Our Lady of Guadalupe is really a cultural icon as well as a spiritual icon. And I just really learned to love the Blessed Mother's role as Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I think it was because of the fact that she's so identified with the people. So it's this reminder that Mary comes to us as we are. And it's a great feast to kind of think about that as well, to really focus on this idea, right? That Mary is there for us as a mother, that she comes to us as we are. We can go to her as we are, just like a child can go to a parent. And so to develop that relationship a little bit more, and if you can make Mexican cookies, well, even better. And then we have the Feast of St. Lucy on December 13th. So you've probably seen photos of that. It's the celebrations tend to have their roots in Sweden. St. Lucy's often depicted with an evergreen crown that has candles on it. Obviously, for liability reasons, we don't recommend that. But there is a popular tradition, which is to make St. Lucy's bread or St. Lucy's buns, and then you put the candles in it, and it has that look of a crown. So again, this is a really nice one if you've got children and you want to try and engage them in another feast day throughout this season. And there is a link actually to 2 different kinds of St. Lucy's bread in the chat resources. So there's all of these different feast days and there's of course more. If you're have your give us this day, you're going to see every single day a feast day. So maybe you develop something on your own throughout the season that speaks to you. If there's a special feast day that you can weave into your practices. So that's a lot. And those are all great things, but you knew there had to be a but. Like all of spiritual life, this season calls us also for a balance of intentional silent prayer and active everyday prayer. So what does this look like in real life? It requires us to approach this season with attention and intention. And while it's possible and wonderful to weave prayer into all the different everyday moments of our life, we know that our active prayer can only be as powerful as the silent prayer that is its foundation. So I'm going to say what needs to be said, even though it's not always popular, which is we do need to spend some time in silent prayer with God in the midst of the season. It could be simply turning off the radio when you're driving your car, or not bringing your AirPods when you go for a walk. It doesn't have to be sitting still and meditating for 20 minutes. Although if you can do that, you definitely should. But it can be even 5 minutes of silence that really can start to be transforming. So give it a try and see what you think. I know some people love silence, some people don't. So we experiment with it, right? And we have so many different ways of praying to God that we can find the one that works for us. But I will tell you that we know from scripture, right? We see Jesus retreat into the desert. To be silent, to be prayerful. We see Elijah waiting for God in all of the commotion and finding God in the still small voice. So sometimes we have to get quiet to be able to hear the still small voice. When I was very blessed to have Father John Eudes Bamberger as a spiritual director and confessor out at the Trappist Abbey in Western New York, the Abbey of the Genesee. And Father John Eudes was a novice under Thomas Merton. He knew Thomas Merton his whole life, and he was a spiritual director to Henry Nouwen. So once I got past the I'm not worthy phase of our meeting, I just sat back and was so grateful for his direction and guidance. And he said a couple of things that have stayed with me and that I share. If you're on here and you've been on retreat with me, you've heard me talk about this. I talked about all the things that got in the way that made it so I couldn't pray. I didn't have time. My job was too busy. My family was had a lot of demands. My kids had too many things to do. And he said, everybody looks at us because we're monks. And so we live by a rule and thinks it's impossible. How do they live by this rule? Because the monks know when they're going to wake up, when they're going to work, when they're going to pray, when they're going to rest. And he said, but if you look at your life and you write down everything you do for the next 2 weeks, you will discover the rule you have chosen to live by. And then you can decide if that's the rule that should be guiding your life. And that was a pretty powerful thing, because on most days, what I'm doing in a day is probably not the rule I want to live by. It's filled with a lot of unnecessary stuff, where prayer could be entering the scene, even though I say I'm too busy, right? And the other thing he did, and this is the only penance I ever share with people because it was a really good penance. So I went to confession to him, and at the end, he gave me my penance, and it began for the next 6 weeks. And as you know, that's not a good start to any penance, but I know what he was doing. He was trying to make a habit in me. So for the next 6 weeks, every single night for 30 minutes, you are to sit in silence in the presence of God. Don't say oral prayer, don't read scripture, don't journal, don't listen to music. It's just you and God face to face, waiting for the still small voice. And I did it for 6 weeks. And after the 6 weeks was over, I began to do what we do, which was whittle away 15 minutes here and a day there. And slowly it started to shrink. And I can't say I've gone back to the 30 minutes a night, but I always know it's the ideal. And he planted something in me that reminded me that sometimes I just have to remember that there are 30 minutes in my day that I think is so busy, and I just need to give it to God sometimes. And even if it's only 5 minutes, it's better than no minutes. So if we can find that time to be with God for just 5 minutes a day in silence, it can really begin to change our lives. And then the last practice that I have to recommend, and again, I recommend it to everyone whenever I speak, whenever I lead retreats. And to me, in Advent, it's a really good practice, is a gratitude practice. Um, I've done gratitude practices on and off for many, many years, but in the last 7 years, I made it a consistent nightly practice. So my gratitude practice is super easy. There's like no excuses for not doing a gratitude practice. I have a spiral journal next to my bed. Every night when I go to bed, I write down 3 things for which I am grateful from that day. It doesn't have to, again, just like we heard in Mary Oliver, we're not talking about the extravagant or the really big things. You can put those on, but we're talking about the small things, like snow flurries, the first snow, or going for a walk with my dog and seeing a beautiful bird, or the smell of coffee in the morning, or talking to my children on FaceTime. It's very simple things like that. I write down 3 things every night. It takes less than a minute, so there's no excuse for it. And since I got really consistent with this practice 7 years ago, I continue the count of my blessings. So I number them, and every time I start a new journal, I start where I left off. So the count is continuing to climb. So my current journal, which is next to my bed, because I checked it last night when I was doing my count, is 8,698 things that I'm grateful for. So that's a little more than 7 years worth. And that gives you a sense of how gratitude practice can change your life. Because when you start writing down and start seeing those kinds of things in your daily life, it flips your perspective from one of lack to one of abundance. So instead of thinking about the things you don't have, you start looking for the things that you're going to write in your gratitude journal. Somebody else refers to this kind of thing as beauty hunting. And it's true. If you start this practice, you will find yourself walking down a street and noticing something out of the clear blue, and you'll be like, that's going in my gratitude journal. And you suddenly start noticing the abundance of blessings in your life, and it really shifts your perspective. So if you're willing, I would recommend getting a spiral notebook or just a pad, whatever you have, putting it next to your bed and writing down 3 things for each day of the rest of Advent, and let's go Christmas season too. So we'll get you through the Christmas season. We'll pull like a Father John Hughes. You got to get through Christmas. And write those things down and see how it changes the way you feel about your life. Meister Eckhart, the mystic, said, if the only prayer you ever said was thank you, that would be enough. So keeping in mind that through all of these things, it all just comes back to, right, that praise and that thanksgiving and that love that's at the heart of our faith. There is a beautiful quote from Benedictine Sister Joan Chittister on the liturgical season of Advent. And she says, the liturgical year opens with Advent, the season that teaches us to wait for what is beyond the obvious. It trains us to see what is behind the apparent. Advent makes us look for God in all those places we have until now ignored. So it's just that beautiful reminder that that's what this season is about, right? We're in this waiting phase, but we're also expressing our gratitude. We're in awe of what's coming, what we know is coming, and also of our daily lives, right? It's the 2 things together. And I think another important thing to remember is that you have to be kind to yourself as well. So, of course, the season's going to get away from you. You may leave this retreat and be like, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then it all goes off the rails. And that's okay. So then you're compassionate with yourself and you're gentle with yourself and you simply begin again, right? We just begin again. So that's our motto, really, is that we're always going to find ourselves 2 steps, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We just get it back up and we begin again. So as we head toward the rest of our Advent season, we're thinking about, again, looking for the divine in those everyday moments, using tasks as invitations to prayer, using the rituals and feasts of our tradition, making time for sacred pauses and some silence, even if it's just a sliver, and seeing if you can start a gratitude practice. And if all else fails and it doesn't work, getting up and beginning again the next day. So I think really Advent does offer us serenity among the insanity, amidst the insanity. With its beautiful interplay of dark and light, the scriptural focus on the coming of the Christ child, but the second coming of Jesus as well. And with its quiet but constant insistence that we prepare, not just for a day, but for a lifetime and for the next one. And although we can't change the secular holiday culture, we can change the way we participate in it. And that's how the culture changes, right? It changes one heart and one home at a time. And so we just begin and start where we are. And I don't know if people have ideas of things they do to help make their faith more visible and helpful during this Advent season, more practices. I'd be happy to hear them. Heidi, if you want to see if people want to share anything.
Yeah, there are a few comments and a wonderful question, actually. Um, Someone notes here actually that you can use the Calm app for recording 3 items for which to be grateful every day too. So if anybody uses the Calm app, that's another great idea. There are
Great.
several comments around music. You know how you talked about Advent playlists. So the CD Good News by Kathy Mattea is a beautiful Advent album that's noted here. And then a couple others were listed in the chat. 4 Legends of St. Nicholas, which is fitting for today. That's medieval chant.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then something called Boston Camerata Noel Noel. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's French Christmas music. Um, so that sounds fabulous too. Yeah, just wonderful ideas. There is a question here that I thought might be helpful for us. If anyone who's participating actually is working in a parish or et cetera, or even in our own lives, in our own families, um, do you have any ideas about how we turn around depression and loneliness and anxiety at this time of year? Because those things tend to spike at the holidays.
Yeah, and you're right. I think there's a lot of we're seeing a lot of anxiety, especially I think this year. I mean, I see it even among my children. So it is challenging, and I think you're right. The isolation, I think, then feeds it, that loneliness. And so being able to connect with other people, even if it has to be virtually, like reaching out to somebody if there's a way to talk to them and do a FaceTime, if it's a family member or a child or a parent. Um, but I think also that silence and that those silence and gratitude practices are really like, to me, those are things that begin to help sort of bring down that anxiety level. It sort of lowers it a little bit because we're sort of stop all of our spinning. So of course, this is the yoga teacher in me coming out. It gives us that opportunity to sit still, and that can be hard for people because some people are very fast moving. So again, those apps, the Calm app, also Insight Timer, that's another one that is free that offers little meditations and things like that. And you can find a lot of those free meditations that will sort of give you something to guide you through what we're talking about, because it is kind of a difficult season, especially for people who may have experienced loss. Somebody who has died, somebody who's ill, losing a job, being in like a financially bad place during the season when people are just spending and spending. So it can be a challenge. And so I think the big thing is connecting, that community element.
Thank you. Really, really helpful. There's a comment here that says getting outside can help too, and
Yeah.
being in nature and maybe getting some light on your face. And if the sun shines where you are, I'm in Minnesota here, so sometimes we have the sun in winter.
Yeah, we're
There's a set,
in New York, we're the same.
right, right.
Not quite as much, but close.
Yeah. There's a centering prayer app that someone recommends as well.
Yes. You're right. There's a centering prayer app and it gives you the instructions. I actually have it on my phone, so it'll guide you through it. It will tell you, you push a little button, it'll ding for starting, and then it will ring again when you're done. So, and again, you can find online, you can find things with Father Keating, who of course was the kind of the centering prayer priest for a long time, and you can find those recordings too. Or Cynthia Bourgeau is another one who has recordings that sometimes can be useful.
Fantastic. And the only thing I wanted to share here too was one of ours that we actually do in our family. I just wanted to share. which is in Advent season, anytime we see a star, we pause and think of Christ. So there's a star on the Macy's bag. There's a
Oh,
star on your Christmas tree. There's stars, of course, in the sky. There's stars everywhere during Advent. And if you start looking for them, you'll see them all over. And so that's kind of a built-in daily pause that we've used since the kids are little.
I love that. Okay, now that's going to be a new one for me.
Look for the stars, right?
I saw somebody said it went by quickly, but I saw volunteer, which of course is a really good way to sort of pull yourself again, that idea of, well, as I was saying with Mary going to Elizabeth, right? She had all of her own stress and fear and anxiety, but she's going to help her cousin. So
Yeah,
that idea of helping someone else can be huge. I think Kathy's waving to us. Is she?
fabulous, fabulous. Yes. Okay. All right. Let's see. I think at this point, Mary, if you want, I'm just looking at the time and being mindful of the time. If you'd like to take us through your closing
Yes,
meditation.
I will. So I'm going to guide us through just a little guided meditation. So this will be a good example of something that maybe you could do something similar when you have anxiety, is to kind of do a little meditation. Um, there will be several places where I say pause and take some breaths and be in the silence for like just a few moments. So when you don't hear anything, I'm still here, but just know that it'll be quiet for a few moments. So we'll start the way we did at the beginning with the poem. So close your eyes or lower your gaze. Some people don't like to close their eyes, so whichever is your preference. Sit up tall. If you can put your feet on the ground, that's great. But if you want to be cozy or lying down, that's fine. Let your hands lie on your lap or on your thighs. They can be up or palms down. And just settle into this space and listen to your breath and use those exhales to let go of tension. Relax your forehead and the space between your eyebrows where we tend to keep a lot of tension. Unclench your jaw. Relax the shoulders so they feel like they move down and away from your ears. Soften your heart and your belly, and let your arms and legs relax and become heavy. And just notice the breath. Pausing here for just a few breaths. In and out through the nose if that's comfortable for you, but if you prefer to breathe through your mouth, that's fine too, whatever's better for you. And I always tell people when I have them doing breathing things, if focusing on your breath makes you more stressed, then let go of that focus. As you inhale, imagine you're inhaling God's love and peace and calm. And as you exhale, breathe out your tensions, your distractions, the worries. Let them go out into the world and be carried away on a wave of breath. Feel your heart beating. Take one hand and place it over your heart and one hand over the belly. And just feel the movement and rhythm of your body for just a few breaths. Feel this miracle that is you. Giving thanks for the life that's beating in your chest and the breath that fills your lungs. And just saying a little prayer of thanks for all the things that your body can do despite whatever challenges we may have. And again, if you notice that your hand on your chest is what's lifting the most, see if you can bring that belly, the air down into the breath down into the belly. And then just let your hands relax back onto your lap or your legs. Now picture yourself at dusk in a favorite location. It could be a place where you sense the divine might be accessible to you. And we're going to be outside. So in keeping with that idea of being in creation. So think of an outside place that's special to you or that you want to be in, where you feel like God's presence is there for you. It might be a vacation spot. It might be your own backyard. It could even be a busy city that you love, or maybe the shore of a lake or the shore of the ocean or on a mountain surrounded by snow. You're outside and you find a comfortable place to sit so you can watch the sun as it sets. Make yourself cozy. You've got a nice warm jacket or sweatshirt. Maybe you have a cup of tea or coffee in hand, and you see lights around you beginning to appear, slowly at first. Street lights or lights in the homes of buildings nearby, or maybe some twinkling Christmas lights wrapping a tree or a porch. Maybe you have a roaring fire in your special place. Or maybe the only light you see comes from the first stars beginning to brighten the evening sky. Just feel this place for a moment. Is it warm or cold? Is it noisy or silent? What sounds do you hear? Maybe it's just the sound of your own breath. Pause and listen. What smells do you smell? What colors do you see around you as the day turns toward night? How do you feel in this place at this moment? Feel the solitude of being at peace in the world around you, no matter what else is going on there. You have a deep sense of contentment and oneness with everything around you. Breathe and take it all in. Suddenly you sense someone else is there with you. Maybe not a someone, but some other being. Maybe an angel, whatever you imagine an angel to look like or be. You brush that side of thought aside at first. Impossible. Or is it? Isn't our faith story filled with messages passed on by angels and dreams and mystical signs like burning bushes? You sit as still as you possibly can, listening to the sound of your own breath and feeling a growing sense of warmth and light within you. Although you don't actually see anything with wings or a halo, you feel God speaking to you through this messenger. You strain your ears as if to hear more clearly, although you know this kind of listening must be done with the ear of the heart, as St. Benedict taught us. And so you relax a bit and simply wait and hope that whatever message you are meant to receive will be understood. Maybe not with your mind, but with your heart and soul. Listen with the ear of the heart. What is God's messenger trying to tell you right now? As you sit in this favorite place in the fading light, what is God transmitting to your heart? Sit for a few moments in silence and the solitude of your space and simply listen for the still, small voice. You sense the angel departing as suddenly as it arrived. Think about how it felt to experience this. Were you afraid, curious, excited, peaceful? Is there something new you now feel called to do? Or were you affirmed on your path? If something was asked of you, was it hard to say yes? Or are you even able to say yes? Did you, like Zechariah and Mary, ask any questions of the angel in return? What were your questions? Pause again and reflect on what your message will require of you in the days and weeks ahead. As dusk darkens into night, you come back to the awareness of the space around you. Notice again the sounds and the smells. Have the colors changed? Are the lights around you increasing as the darkness deepens, or are you fully enveloped in the black night? Gather yourself up and begin to make your way inside. As you go, you have a sense that you are not alone. There is a guiding hand on you, and if you are willing to listen, it will lead you home, to the core of your being, to the place where the Spirit dwells in you. And remember that this Spirit is always accessible when you take the time to pause and simply listen with attention and intention. Remember this feeling and this place so you can return to it whenever you want to. Begin to deepen your breath. Make some little movements with your fingers and toes. Maybe roll the shoulders up and back. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes and return to this space, holding your message tight and the experience loosely as you head deeper into the Advent season. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary, for helping us begin this Advent season with a sense of peace and purpose. What a gift. What a gift this hour has been. Thank you so, so much. An email with a link to this recording and the recording of our conversation will be sent to all registered participants within the next few days. As I mentioned earlier, Mary is one of our more than 150 contributors to Give Us This Day. If you want to know more about Give Us This Day, please visit gutd.net. We're so grateful that you joined us today. May the days ahead be filled with the joyful hope of the coming of Christ. Goodbye.